She stood up for a quiet old man everyone else ignored, and within 24 hours the diner was flooded with soldiers, secrets surfaced, and the entire town began to whisper. But the question that haunted them all was simple. Who was that man?
Welcome to TNM Incredible Story. Let's uncover what really happened.
It was a cold Tuesday evening in the quiet town of Pine Grove, Texas. Inside the faded teal booths of Maple Diner, the smell of fried eggs and burnt coffee lingered in the air. Keisha Thompson, 26, worked the late shift, same as every night. Her apron was stained, her sneakers squeaked with every step, and the tips hadn't been great since the economy turned. Just as she wiped down table 6, the door chimed. A man stepped in, tall, thin, gray-bearded. His army green jacket was frayed at the cuffs, his boots patched with duct tape. But it was his eyes that caught her, tired but alert, watchful. He took the corner booth, the one closest to the window, and quietly asked, "Do you still take these?" He held out an old yellowed veteran's meal voucher. Keisha smiled, nodded, and said gently, "You want the usual? Soup and sandwich?" He nodded once silently. A few minutes later, while she poured him a fresh coffee, the diner door chimed again. This time, it was 3 young men in sharp navy suits. Leather shoes, Rolex watches, Bluetooth earpieces still in. They laughed loud and walked with the confidence of men who'd never been told no. They slid into the booth across from the old man. One of them leaned back, gestured toward him with a smirk and said, "Look at that, still living in a war fantasy. What year do you think it is, Grandpa?" Another snickered. "Bet he's here for the free food. Probably hasn't worked a day since Nam." Keisha froze behind the counter. She waited to see if they'd stop. But the comments got louder, meaner. So she walked up, her hands slightly shaking but her voice firm. "Gentlemen, we don't talk to customers like that here." The first man laughed in disbelief. "Relax, it's a joke. You work here, you don't get to lecture us." She stared at him. Then she slowly placed their check on the table, untouched food and all. "No charge, but I suggest you eat somewhere else next time. Somewhere your arrogance fits on the menu." The room went silent. The suits stared at her like she'd lost her mind. But after a tense pause, they scoffed and left, one tossing a toothpick on the floor in defiance. The old man never looked up. But as she refilled his cup, he murmured, "You didn't have to do that." Keisha leaned down, smiled softly. "Maybe I did." The next morning, Keisha walked into the diner 15 minutes early. The air was crisp, the sunrise soft gold over the rooftops of Pine Grove. But something felt off. Her manager, Linda, a woman who had run Maple Diner for over 2 decades, was waiting by the kitchen, arms crossed, brows knitted. "Keisha, can I talk to you for a second?" In the back office, Linda pulled the door closed and sighed. "You know I respect you. You're one of the best we've got. But what happened last night? You sure you want to stand by it?" Keisha frowned. "You mean with the suits?" Linda nodded, sliding her phone across the table. A Yelp review glared back at her. "Rude waitress kicked out paying customers for joking around. Never going back. Zero professionalism." Keisha crossed her arms. They were harassing a veteran. "I don't care what suit they were wearing." Linda sighed again, but softer this time. "You did the right thing morally. But one of them, he's not just some punk in a tie. Word is, he's part of the investment board trying to revitalize downtown. He's connected." Keisha blinked. "So what? I'm supposed to let rich bullies talk war veterans, just because they drive Teslas?" "No, but you should know. People are watching, and not all of them care about right or wrong. Some just care about image." By noon, the rumors were everywhere. Customers stared longer. One woman muttered something about entitled staff. Another table stiffed her on a $40 tab. The laughter in the diner wasn't warm anymore. It was cautious. Even her co-workers started acting strange. Tim, the dishwasher, avoided eye contact. Sandra, who usually shared memes during slow hours, was suddenly too busy. Still, Keisha stayed professional. She refilled coffees, took orders, smiled even when it burned. Then at 8:27 p.m., the door opened again. The old man was back. Same jacket, same silent dignity. He took the same booth and waited patiently. Keisha brought him the soup before he even ordered. He ate quietly, and when he stood to leave, he pulled something from his coat pocket, a folded piece of paper and left it on the seat. Keisha watched him walk out into the night. She waited until the door closed behind him. Then she walked to the booth, picked up the paper. It wasn't a bill, not a thank you note. It simply read, "Come to 14 Riverdale Street, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Someone owes you an apology." The next morning, Keisha stood in front of a small house at 14 Riverdale Street. It was a quiet neighborhood. Well-kept lawns, wind chimes on porches, the smell of dew and cut grass lingering in the air. But the house in front of her looked different. Not run-down, not flashy, just intentional, like it was waiting for her. She checked her phone. 9:59 a.m. One deep breath. She stepped up and knocked. No answer at first. Then the door creaked open, and standing there was the last person she expected. One of the men in the suits. Not the arrogant one who mocked the old man. Not the one who tossed the toothpick. The quiet one. The one who had barely spoken. He wasn't wearing a suit now. No watch, no polished shoes. Just a plain t-shirt and jeans. His posture was different too, less smug, more military. Keisha stepped back. "What is this?" The man didn't smile, but his voice was calm. "Come in, he's waiting for you." She hesitated. Every instinct screamed no, but curiosity, and something else she couldn't name, pulled her forward. Inside, the air was warm, a faint smell of coffee. And on the wall, Keisha noticed something odd. Framed photographs, all military. Uniforms, medals, a younger version of the old man posing with fellow soldiers. In the living room, he sat, same jacket, same boots, but with something different this time, a calm authority. He looked less like a forgotten veteran, and more like a man who used to lead battalions. Keisha stood, arms crossed. "What is this? Some kind of setup?" He looked at her, not with judgment, but something gentler. "I had to know. If someone out there still sees a man beneath the dirt." "You did." She blinked, confused. Then the younger man stepped forward. "My name is Marcus Hale. I'm not just some corporate investor. I'm an active officer in the U.S. Army. Special operations." "That stunt in the diner?" "It was a test." Keisha stared at them. "A test?" Marcus nodded. "My father, retired Colonel Samuel Hale, has been working on a project to identify civilians who don't just talk about respect for veterans, but live it. You passed." She said nothing. The room suddenly felt smaller. "Colonel Hale," the old man leaned forward, "you didn't know me. You owed me nothing, and still you stood up." He paused, then added, "We're building something, a foundation, a network, to support vets who slip through the cracks. And we want you involved." Keisha sat in silence. 1,000 questions swirled in her mind, but none found their way to her lips. Marcus stood nearby, respectful but distant, like a soldier who'd been trained to observe before speaking. Colonel Hale leaned back in his chair. His voice was calm, deliberate. "You see, most people walk past someone like me and assume the worst. Drunk, dangerous, worthless, but you didn't hesitate. That tells me more about your character than a resume ever could." Keisha finally spoke, her voice low. "You said you want me involved. What does that mean?" Marcus stepped forward and laid a folder on the coffee table. Inside were detailed plans. The Honor Frontline Initiative, a grassroots program to place community advocates in small towns, bridging the gap between forgotten veterans and real support. "You'd lead the pilot chapter," he said. "We'll train you, fund you. This is more than a job, it's a mission." Keisha opened the folder, flipping through the pages. But her hands froze when she saw a photo clipped to the back. It was old, faded, but unmistakable. A nurse in desert fatigues, smiling beside a medical tent. In her arms, a baby wrapped in a cloth. On the back of the photo, scrawled in neat handwriting, "Corporal Denise Thompson, Iraq, 1999. Keisha's eyes widened. Her voice cracked. "That's my mother." Colonel Hale nodded solemnly. "She was a medic. One of the finest I ever served with. Took shrapnel saving my squad during an ambush. Spent her last 6 weeks in the field hospital. Never once complained." Keisha's knees weakened. She sat down slowly. She never talked much about Iraq, just that it changed her. Hale reached into a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges.
"She gave me this.
Said if I ever met you and I'd know when, I should pass it on." Hands trembling, Keisha broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated just after her birth. Her mother had written about the loneliness, the war, and her hopes for Keisha. If she ever finds someone in pain, I hope she won't look away. I hope she'll stand up, even when no one else will, because the world needs more women who carry fire and mercy in equal measure. Tears welled in Keisha's eyes. The room fell quiet. Marcus knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on the folder. Your mother was a warrior. Now we're asking you to continue her fight in a different way. Keisha looked up, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like just a waitress. She felt called. 1 week later, the Maple Diner looked no different from the outside. Same chipped paint, same sun-bleached neon sign. But something was coming, something no one in Pine Grove could have predicted. Keisha stood behind the counter just like before, but this time, her apron was replaced by a navy blue blazer, and pinned to her chest was a silver badge, Director Honor Frontline Initiative. Linda, her manager, stood beside her, stunned but proud. At precisely 9 a.m., the sound of boots echoed down the street. Then came the low hum of engines, military trucks, jeeps, dozens of them. The townspeople poured onto the sidewalks, confused, whispering, and then they saw it. A procession of veterans, young and old. Wheelchairs, uniforms, medals glinting in the morning sun, marching behind a large banner that read, "For those who still see us." Leading the parade was Colonel Hale, walking tall. On his left, Marcus in uniform. On his right, Keisha. The 3 suits, who had mocked the old man weeks earlier, stood near their office, across the street, watching in disbelief. One of them took a cautious step forward, as if to apologize. Keisha didn't stop. She just met his eyes as she walked past. No anger, just clarity. Some debts can't be paid in words. The crowd was silent. Then one by one people began to clap, slow, hesitant, then louder. By the time they reached the diner, the whole block stood in applause. Keisha stepped onto a small podium. The mayor handed her a microphone, but she said only this. He was raised by a warrior who believed that every life has dignity, even when the world forgets it. I stood up for one man, and now I'm standing for all of them. Then just before stepping down, she opened a sealed envelope. It was a legal deed, signed and notarized. Colonel Hale had bought the Maple Diner and donated it to the Honor Frontline Foundation. It would become the first Veterans Welcome Cafe in the state, run by vets, for vets serving food and dignity in equal measure. As the crowd dispersed, a man in a long coat stood near the edge of the sidewalk. He approached Keisha quietly and handed her a small black box. Inside, a military challenge coin. On the back was engraved, "For courage when no one is watching." She looked up, but the man was gone. She turned the coin over again and again and smiled.